This is the story of a young woman named Emily Harper. She lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood tucked away from the chaos of city life. Emily was always the curious type, constantly seeking new adventures, new places, and stories to tell. But one winter evening, she found herself entangled in a nightmare that she never could have imagined, and her life would never be the same. It all started a few weeks before Christmas. Emily had just graduated college and, feeling a bit lost and unsure about her future, decided to visit her grandmother's old house in the countryside for a break. It had been a while since she'd been there. Her grandmother, a woman of few words and even fewer visitors, had passed away a few years ago, leaving Emily the house. It was an old, charming place, creaky floors, dusty windows, and a fireplace that always smelled like smoke and wood. Emily wasn't expecting much. She just wanted to get away for a while, breathe in the fresh country air, and clear her head. Her grandmother had always spoken cryptically about strange happenings in the house, but Emily had never thought much of it. It was probably just stories for the sake of keeping a child's imagination busy, but she was about to find out that there was a darker side to her grandmother's house, a side that had been hiding in the shadows for far too long. The first night was peaceful enough. Emily unpacked, settled in, and even managed to enjoy a cup of tea by the fire. As the night grew colder, she pulled a blanket around herself and read a book she'd found in one of the drawers. A strange old novel that seemed out of place in her grandmother's collection. It was about a family who had lived in this very house long ago. The story was strange, full of dark and unsettling themes, and Emily found herself both intrigued and disturbed by it. Around midnight, as she was preparing to go to bed, she heard a noise from upstairs. It wasn't the usual creaking of the house, settling, or the wind howling outside. This was something more deliberate. It was a soft scraping sound, followed by what sounded like footsteps. Emily stood frozen for a moment, listening. But when no further sounds followed, she brushed it off as just her imagination running wild. The next morning, she decided to explore the house a bit more, hoping to distract herself from the strange noises. The house was much larger than she remembered. Long hallways, hidden rooms, and old creaky stairs. She wandered through the rooms, each one holding its own collection of dust-covered antiques, faded photographs, and remnants of her grandmother's life. When she reached the attic, she noticed something odd. The door was slightly ajar, as if someone had been there recently. Emily hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of her. She pushed the door open, and the cold air from the attic rushed down, making her shiver. The attic was cramped and filled with old trunks and boxes. But there, in the far corner, was something that immediately caught her attention. An old antique mirror, covered in a thick layer of dust. It was large, with an ornate frame that seemed to be carved out of dark wood. As Emily wiped the dust away, she noticed something strange about the reflection. It wasn't that the mirror was cracked or broken. No, it was something much more subtle. In the reflection, Emily could see herself standing in front of the mirror, but there was something off. Her reflection seemed distorted, twisted in a way that made her heart race. She took a step back, blinking, trying to shake the feeling off. But before she could turn away, she heard the footsteps again. This time they were much louder, coming from directly behind her. Her breath caught in her throat, and she spun around, expecting to see someone standing there. But there was no one. The room was empty as it had been when she first entered. Her nerves were starting to get the best of her. She decided to leave the attic and head downstairs, but as she turned to walk away, something caught her eye. The reflection in the mirror had changed. In the glass, she could see a shadowy figure standing behind her, a figure that wasn't there in reality. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, and she took a step back. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure in the mirror seemed to move closer, its dark shape shifting and swirling as if it was coming for her. She turned and ran out of the attic, slamming the door behind her. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the mirror, about the figure in the reflection. She told herself it was just her imagination, but the fear gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, something waiting for her to return. At around 3 a.m., she finally gave in. She couldn't stand the thought of staying in the house any longer without answers. Emily grabbed a flashlight and made her way back up to the attic. The door was still slightly ajar, just as it had been earlier. Her hands trembled as she pushed it open, the cold air hitting her face once again. She approached the mirror with caution, her heart racing in her chest. This time she didn't wipe away the dust. She was too afraid to touch it. Instead, she just stood there staring at the reflection. For a long time, nothing happened. The mirror was empty, just her own reflection staring back at her. But then, as if summoned by her presence, the figure appeared again. Slowly, steadily, as if it was waiting for her to notice. Emily's blood ran cold. She could see it now. Its face, pale and twisted, its eyes dark voids staring back at her. It reached out, its hand slowly moving toward her through the glass. In a panic, Emily turned to run, but she was too late. The figure in the mirror was no longer just a reflection. It had stepped out of the glass, its cold, spectral form now standing behind her. She spun around, but it was too late. The figure grabbed her by the wrist, its icy touch sending a shock of terror through her entire body. Before Emily could scream, everything went black. When Emily woke up, she was no longer in the attic. She found herself in a small, dark room, one she didn't recognize. Her head ached, and her body felt heavy, as though she had been unconscious for hours. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The mirror. It was standing in the corner of the room, reflecting nothing but darkness. And in the reflection, Emily could see herself, still, lifeless, her body lying on the floor. The figure stood beside her, its twisted grin plastered across its face. Emily tried to move, but she couldn't. She was trapped, bound to the mirror and the figure that haunted it, and there, in the reflection, she understood the truth. She had become just another soul trapped in the house, another victim of the mirror, and the worst part? The house was waiting for the next visitor, waiting for someone else to uncover its terrible secret. As the years passed, the house remained empty, but the whispers in the town grew louder. Those who ventured near it could sometimes hear the sound of footsteps, the scratching of nails against the walls, and the soft whisper of a name. But no one ever stayed long enough to find out who the voice belonged to. The mirror, however, was always there, patiently waiting for the next curious soul to come too close. And Emily Harper's name would be the next one whispered in the dark. This is the story of a man named James Walker, who, like many, thought he understood the world around him. He had grown up in a quiet, unremarkable town, and he had spent most of his life working a steady job as a mechanic. Nothing out of the ordinary ever happened to him. That was until one winter night, when he encountered something that made him question everything he thought he knew about the world. It all started a few months after James had moved into a small, charming house. On the outskirts of town, it wasn't a particularly grand house, but it was perfect for him. Isolated, quiet, and surrounded by trees. James liked the peace and solitude. He had spent years in the hustle and bustle of city life, and now he just wanted to be left alone. One evening, as winter crept in and the cold winds began to howl, James sat by the fireplace reading a book. The flames crackled, casting shadows that danced on the walls. He had just started to get comfortable when a loud bang sounded from upstairs. James froze. His heart skipped a beat, and he set his book down, straining to hear. At first, he thought it might be the wind, or perhaps a pipe had burst. But then he heard it again. A heavy thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Someone, or something, was moving around upstairs. Feeling uneasy, James grabbed a flashlight and slowly made his way to the stairs. The house was unnervingly quiet, the kind of silence that seems to press in on you, making every small sound feel exaggerated. He reached the bottom of the stairs and hesitated for a moment. The footsteps had stopped, but the silence that followed was just as unnerving. Taking a deep breath, James made his way up the stairs. The wooden steps creaked under his weight, and his flashlight flickered slightly. He reached the landing at the top of the stairs and stood there for a moment, listening. There was no more sound. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but he had to investigate. James checked every room on the second floor, but everything was as it should be. The rooms were empty, the windows were shut, and nothing seemed out of place. He was about to head back downstairs when he noticed something strange. One of the bedroom doors was ajar. It wasn't a door he used often, but something about the way it stood slightly open felt wrong. He walked over to the door, pushing it open gently. As the door creaked, he could feel the air in the room grow colder. His breath fogged in front of him as he stepped inside. The room looked like any other bedroom, nothing extraordinary. But then he noticed it, a small wooden box sitting on the nightstand next to the bed. James didn't remember ever seeing that box before. Curious, he walked over to it. It was a simple box, no bigger than a shoebox, made of dark wood with intricate carvings on its surface. He picked it up, examining it closely. The box felt strangely heavy for its size, and there was something unsettling about the way it felt in his hands. It was almost as if it didn't belong in this house. James set the box down on the bed and carefully opened it. Inside, he found a collection of old photographs, black and white images of people he didn't recognize. Some were of children, others of adults, but all of them had one thing in common. They were all staring directly at the camera with expressions of terror. The faces were contorted in a way that sent a shiver down his spine. What made it worse was that in each of the photos there was something lurking in the background. It was hard to make out at first, but the more he stared at the photos, the clearer it became. A figure cloaked in shadow seemed to be standing just out of reach, its face obscured. James felt a cold sweat form on his forehead as he sifted through the photos. He didn't know what to make of them, but one thing was clear. The people in the pictures were terrified of something, and whatever that something was, it seemed to be connected to this house. He slammed the box shut, his heart racing. As he did, he heard something behind him, a low guttural growl. James spun around, his flashlight sweeping across the room. There was nothing there. His breath came in short bursts as he looked around, trying to calm himself. He had to be imagining things. It was just the house creaking. It had to be. But then the growl came again, louder this time, as if it was right behind him. His heart thudded in his chest. He spun around once more, but this time he saw something. A figure, tall and shadowy, was standing in the doorway. Its face was hidden in darkness, but its presence was undeniable. James could feel his blood run cold as it took a step toward him. Without thinking, he turned and ran, rushing down the stairs and out the front door. The cold night air hit him like a slap to the face, but he didn't care. He ran and ran, not stopping until he reached the edge of the woods. His legs burned, and his breath came in ragged gasps, but he couldn't bring himself to turn back. He didn't know what he had just seen, but he knew one thing for sure. It wasn't normal. It wasn't human. James didn't sleep that night. He sat on the couch, staring out the window at the house which loomed in the distance. He tried to convince himself that he had just been imagining things, that it had all been a trick of the mind. But deep down, he knew the truth. Something was in that house. Something dark and dangerous. The next day, he contacted the previous owner of the house, an elderly man named Mr. Adams. Mr. Adams had lived in the house for decades, but when James mentioned the strange happenings, the old man fell silent on the phone. After a long pause, Mr. Adams spoke. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he asked in a trembling voice. "The thing in the house. The thing that doesn't belong. It's been there for years. It's never let anyone stay for long." James asked him what he meant, but Mr. Adams refused to say more, urging him to leave the house and never return. James didn't listen. He couldn't. He had to know what was going on. That night he went back to the house, determined to confront whatever was haunting it. This time he was prepared. He had brought a flashlight, a hammer, and a few other tools, hoping that something, anything, would help him figure out what was going on. He entered the house with caution, moving quietly as he ascended the stairs. When he reached the bedroom, he saw the box again, sitting on the nightstand. This time the air felt different, charged, tense, as if the room itself was watching him. He grabbed the box once more and opened it, but this time, there was something different inside. The photographs were gone, replaced by a small handwritten note. It read, "You shouldn't have opened it. Now you belong to me." James felt his blood run cold. The room grew darker, the shadows lengthening, and he could hear the growl again, louder this time. The figure was in the doorway, but this time, it wasn't alone. There were more of them, shadows moving, swirling around him, whispering in languages he couldn't understand. Suddenly the door slammed shut, and James was trapped. The last thing he heard before everything went black was a voice, soft and chilling, whispering, "Welcome to your new home." And just like that, James Walker was never seen again. Some say that if you listen closely, you can still hear his voice, trapped inside the walls of that house. But no one who has ever stepped foot inside has come back to tell the tale. This is the story of Rachel Jennings, a woman who never believed in ghosts or the supernatural. She was a practical, logical person, until one fateful night when her life turned upside down, and she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. Rachel had recently moved to a small town called Hartfield, just on the outskirts of Manchester. She had gotten a job at a local law firm and was eager to start her new life away from the bustle of the city. The small town was charming, with its cobblestone streets, cozy cottages, and friendly people. Rachel had rented a quaint little house on the edge of town. It was older than she expected, but the price was right, and the landlord, Mr. Thompson, was kind enough to assure her it was well maintained. At first, everything seemed perfect. Rachel settled in quickly, spending her days at work and her evenings in the peaceful silence of her new home. The house was filled with light, and the large windows let in the warm glow of the afternoon sun. But as the weeks went by, Rachel began to feel something strange. It wasn't anything she could put her finger on, just a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. One evening, Rachel had just finished dinner and was getting ready to settle in with a book when she heard a sound coming from the attic. It was faint at first, just a soft creak of floorboards. She brushed it off, assuming it was just the house settling. But then the sound grew louder. It was unmistakable. A series of slow, deliberate footsteps, as if someone was walking up there. Her heart skipped a beat, and she stood frozen in place. Who could be in the attic, she thought, her mind racing. She had no reason to believe anyone else had been up there. The landlord had assured her the attic was locked and unused. Feeling a mix of curiosity and unease, Rachel grabbed a flashlight and made her way to the attic. The narrow stairs creaked under her weight as she climbed, and the air grew colder the higher she went. When she reached the top, she hesitated for a moment before slowly pushing open the door. The attic was empty, save for old furniture covered in dusty sheets and boxes stacked haphazardly against the walls. But there, in the far corner, Rachel noticed something odd. A small wooden chest. It wasn't something she had seen before. She walked over to it, her flashlight flickering as she inspected it. The chest was old, with intricate carvings etched into the wood, and it seemed out of place in the otherwise abandoned attic. Rachel reached for the chest and opened it. Inside, she found a collection of strange items: old photographs, letters tied with faded ribbons, and a small, tarnished locket. As she picked up the locket, she felt a chill run through her body. She had no idea why, but the object seemed to radiate a strange energy. Shaking off the feeling, Rachel closed the chest and carried it back downstairs with her. She placed it on the kitchen table and began to examine the items more closely. Photographs were of a young woman, dressed in clothing from the early 1900s. She had dark eyes and long, wavy hair, and there was something haunting about her smile. Rachel didn't recognize her, but there was a familiarity to her face, as if she had seen her somewhere before. The letters, written in an elegant script, were addressed to someone named Edward, though the handwriting was hard to read due to age and wear. As Rachel carefully unfolded one of the letters, she felt a sudden wave of dizziness, and the words blurred before her eyes. She blinked, trying to shake the sensation, but it only worsened. Then, a whispering voice, barely audible, filled her ears. "Find him! Find Edward!" Rachel jerked back, her heart racing. She was alone in the house, wasn't she? She glanced around the room, but everything seemed still and quiet. The voice faded, leaving her in stunned silence. Her logical mind screamed that it was just a trick of her imagination, that the strange atmosphere in the house was making her hear things. But something inside her felt differently. She felt compelled to learn more about the woman in the photographs, to uncover the mystery behind the chest. Over the next few days, Rachel became obsessed with the contents of the chest. She spent hours searching through the letters and photographs, piecing together a fragmented story. The woman in the pictures was named Evelyn Parker, and she had once lived in the house Rachel now called home. Evelyn had been engaged to a man named Edward Whitmore, but their love story had ended in tragedy. According to one of the letters, Evelyn had disappeared without a trace, leaving Edward heartbroken and searching for her for years. There were no signs of foul play, but it was clear that something had gone horribly wrong. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that Evelyn's spirit was trying to communicate with her. The more she delved into the history of the house, the more she felt as though she were being pulled into the past. Strange occurrences began happening. Objects moved on their own. Doors creaked open in the middle of the night, and Rachel would sometimes wake up to the feeling of being watched. One evening, as Rachel was reading through another letter, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her chest, like something was pressing down on her heart. She gasped for air, clutching her chest, but the pain subsided as quickly as it had come. Her breath came in short, frantic gasps, and she stumbled to her feet, trying to steady herself. "Find Edward, before it's too late," the voice whispered, again, clearer this time, filling her mind. Rachel's heart pounded. She had to find Edward. She didn't know why, but the urge was undeniable. It was as if Evelyn's spirit was pleading with her to finish what had been left undone. The next morning, Rachel visited the town's historical society to ask about Edward Whitmore. The librarian, a sweet woman named Mrs. Walker, directed her to a dusty old archive filled with records and town histories. After a long search, Rachel found a newspaper article from the 1920s about the disappearance of Evelyn Parker. The article mentioned that Edward had died soon after, his heart broken beyond repair. There was no mention of any investigation into Evelyn's disappearance, and no sign of Edward after his death. Rachel couldn't believe what she was reading. The pieces were falling into place, but they didn't make sense. She had to know more. She had to find out what had happened to Edward. Determined to uncover the truth, Rachel returned to the house and went up to the attic again. This time she was determined to find more clues. As she searched through the remaining boxes, her flashlight landed on a dusty old journal. It was Edward's. Inside the journal, Edward's pain and torment were laid bare. He had never stopped searching for Evelyn, convinced that she was still alive. But the last entry was different. In it, he wrote, "I can feel her near. She wants me to find her, but I fear it is too late." Rachel felt a shiver run down her spine as she read the final words. She turned the page, but there was nothing more. Suddenly, she heard a faint sound behind her. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping. Rachel turned, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing in the doorway, was the figure of a woman. She was dressed in an old-fashioned gown, her long hair flowing down her back. It was Evelyn. "Find Edward," Evelyn whispered. And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, Evelyn vanished, leaving Rachel alone in the cold, dark attic. Rachel knew what she had to do. She had to find Edward, or whatever was left of him, and put the restless spirits to rest. The mystery of Evelyn's disappearance and the tragic love story that had bound her to this place was finally within reach. But as Rachel turned to leave the attic, she felt something cold brush against her hand. A faint voice, barely audible, echoed in her ear. "Don't forget, Rachel, I'm still here." And just like that, Rachel Jennings knew she would never escape the house or the spirits within it. This is the story of James Walker, a man who thought he had found the perfect escape, but instead stumbled upon something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. It's a story that will make you question what's real and what's just a nightmare. James had always been the kind of person who wanted peace and quiet. After years of the hectic city life in London, he decided to leave it all behind. He wanted a fresh start, away from the noise, the rush, and the constant stress of work. He found a small, remote cottage in the village of Ashford, nestled deep in the countryside of England. The photos of the cottage were charming, with ivy-covered walls and a tranquil garden. The rent was cheap, the village was small, and most importantly, it seemed peaceful. The first few weeks were bliss. The air was fresh, the neighbors friendly, and the evenings quiet. James spent his days walking through the fields, taking long hikes in the nearby woods, and simply enjoying the peace. He had no intention of rushing back to the city, but there was something off about the village. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just a strange feeling. The people seemed too nice, almost too perfect. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Reeve, was always smiling, but had a way of looking at him that made him uncomfortable. The local farmer, Mr. Simmons, would often stop by for a chat, but there was a coldness to his voice that James couldn't shake. They all spoke about the village's history in a strange, cryptic way, almost as if they were hiding something. One evening, after a long day of hiking, James decided to take a different route home through the woods. He'd heard that there was an old abandoned church hidden deep in the trees, and he was curious. The sun had just begun to set, casting an eerie golden glow over the landscape. The forest was unusually quiet, the only sound being the crunch of leaves under his boots. After a few minutes of walking, James found the church. It was more than just abandoned. It was forgotten. The stone walls were crumbling, the roof caved in, and ivy had swallowed the building whole. He felt a shiver run down his spine as he approached the door, which was slightly ajar. Against his better judgment, he stepped inside. The air inside was musty, and the smell of decay filled his nostrils. The pews were broken, the altar empty, and the stained glass windows were shattered. But there was something else, a feeling of presence. It was as if he wasn't alone, though he couldn't see anyone. James chalked it up to his imagination and turned to leave. But as he stepped out, something caught his eye, a weathered plaque on the ground near the entrance. It was hard to read, but after brushing away the dirt, he could make out a few words. In loving memory of Emily Thorne, 1823-1843. The name struck him for some reason. There was something oddly familiar about it, but he couldn't place it. He hurried back to his cottage, shaking off the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Over the next few days, James couldn't get Emily Thorne out of his mind. He asked around the village but found no one who knew much about her. Mrs. Reeve told him that she was just a young woman who had lived in Ashford a long time ago, but her death was a tragedy. It was a long time ago, she added, her smile a little too tight. Best to leave the past in the past. But James couldn't leave it alone. He began to search for any information about Emily Thorne, visiting the local library and asking the older villagers. The more he uncovered, the more disturbing the story became. Emily Thorne had been a beautiful, kind-hearted young woman, loved by everyone in the village. But her life was cut short when she was found dead in the woods near the church. No signs of a struggle, no obvious cause of death. The villagers whispered that her death had been the result of a tragic accident, but James didn't buy it. The more he learned, the more questions he had. One evening, just after dusk, James decided to visit the church again. He wasn't sure why, but something drew him back. The air was thick with mist, and the woods seemed even quieter than usual. As he approached the church, he thought he saw a flicker of light in one of the broken windows. It was brief, but it was enough to send a chill down his spine. He pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The light seemed to be coming from the altar, where a single candle was burning. It was the first time he had ever seen a light in the church. The atmosphere felt heavier than before, and the silence was oppressive. Then, he saw her. She was standing in the shadows near the altar, her long hair cascading down her back. Her white dress shimmered in the dim light. James froze, his heart pounding in his chest. She didn't move, didn't speak, but he could feel her eyes on him. as though she were waiting for something. Who are you?" James whispered, his voice barely above a breath. The woman's figure seemed to flicker, like a shadow in the corner of his vision. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and the candlelight flickered wildly. The room seemed to warp around him, the walls closing in. He stumbled back, nearly tripping over the broken pews. Then, in the blink of an eye, the woman vanished. James ran from the church, not stopping until he reached his cottage. He slammed the door shut behind him, his hands shaking. He couldn't explain what had just happened. Was it a hallucination? A trick of the light? The next morning, James went straight to the village pub to find Ben Harris, the village historian. Ben was an older man, quiet but knowledgeable. If anyone could help him understand what was happening, it was Ben. Ben listened to James's story without interrupting, but when James mentioned the candle and the woman, the color drained from Ben's face. He stared at James for a long moment before speaking. "You've seen her," Ben said quietly. "I was hoping you wouldn't." "Seen? Who?" James asked, confused. "Emily Thorne," Ben replied. "It's true what they say about her death. It wasn't an accident. Emily was murdered. The villagers didn't want to speak of it, so they buried it, literally and figuratively. But the truth is, Emily never left. She's cursed this village. And anyone who learns the truth, well, they don't leave either." James's stomach churned. "What do you mean, cursed?" "Emily's spirit," Ben explained, his voice low, "will always haunt this place until her murderer is found. The candle you saw? That's her signal. She's calling for someone to finish what she started." Suddenly, everything clicked. The strange occurrences, the odd behavior of the villagers, the feeling of being watched. It was all connected. Emily wasn't just a ghost. She was a soul trapped in the village, desperate for justice. James didn't know how to stop it. He didn't know what to do. But one thing was certain. The village of Ashford wasn't as peaceful as it seemed. And Emily Thorne wasn't ready to let go. The last thing James Walker wrote in his journal, before he disappeared without a trace, was this: "I don't know if I'm losing my mind, or if the village is somehow drawing me in, but I can't escape her. No one can, and I think she's getting closer." No one ever found James. The village continues to stand quiet and forgotten, as if the tragedy never happened. But if you ever visit Ashford, don't stray too far from the path in the woods. Because if you do, you might just hear the whisper of Emily Thorne calling out for someone to finish what was started. And once you hear it, there's no going back. This is the story of Sarah Blake, a young woman who moved to a quiet village for a fresh start, but ended up discovering something so terrifying she would never feel safe again, no matter how far she ran. Sarah had just finished university and wanted to escape the chaos of the city. She found an ad online for a small cottage available to rent in a village called Wrenbury. The village, located in the English countryside, was isolated, peaceful, and exactly what she needed after the stress of city life. The pictures of the cottage looked charming: white walls, ivy crawling up the sides, a small garden, and a view of rolling hills. She felt a sense of calm wash over her as she signed the lease. When she arrived, everything seemed perfect. The village was small, with just a handful of houses scattered around. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. The neighbors were kind, always stopping by to say hello and offering fresh vegetables from their gardens. Sarah quickly settled into her new life. Every morning, she'd walk to the bakery for a loaf of bread, chat with Mrs. Montgomery, the local shopkeeper, and spend the afternoons reading in the garden. But after a few weeks, things started to feel off. It was the small things at first. The creaking of the floorboards in the middle of the night when she was sure she had locked all the doors. The feeling of being watched when she walked past the old church in the village square. Or the strange whispers that seemed to float on the wind when she walked by the woods at the edge of the village. She told herself it was just her imagination, nothing more. But one evening, after a long day of work, Sarah went for her usual walk around the village. She'd taken the same route many times, but on this night something was different. As she passed the church, she noticed a figure standing at the edge of the graveyard. It was a woman, tall and thin, dressed in a long, flowing white dress. Her hair was long and black, hanging over her face like a veil. The woman stood perfectly still, as though she was waiting for Sarah to approach. Sarah paused, unsure of what to do. Something about the woman's stillness made her uneasy. She wasn't sure why, but it felt wrong to walk closer. She turned and hurried back home. The image of the woman burned into her mind. But when she reached her cottage, she convinced herself it was just a local resident, maybe one of the farmers out for a late walk or someone paying their respects at the graveyard. That night, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She locked all the windows and doors before going to bed, and even then, she lay awake for hours, listening to the creaks of the house settling and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. The next morning, Sarah went into town to visit the bakery, hoping a conversation with Mrs. Montgomery would clear her mind. When she entered the shop, the older woman greeted her warmly, but then hesitated, eyeing her with a curious look. "You're new to the village, aren't you, dear?" Mrs. Montgomery asked, her voice soft but heavy with something unspoken. Sarah nodded, glancing down at the bread she was about to buy. "I've seen you walking past the church," Mrs. Montgomery continued, her gaze turning serious. "Be careful, dear. The village has its secrets." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, forcing the words out. She didn't want to sound paranoid, but she needed to know. Mrs. Montgomery's eyes flickered toward the door, then lowered her voice. "There's a story about the woman in white. She's been seen around here for as long as anyone can remember. Some say she's a spirit, others say she's a warning. But one thing is certain, no one who's seen her has ever stayed in Wrenbury for long. It's best if you forget about her, Sarah." The words felt like a chill had washed over her. Sarah paid for the bread, thanked Mrs. Montgomery, and left the shop. Her mind raced. A woman in white? A spirit? That night the air was heavier than usual. The house felt colder, and the silence outside seemed too quiet. Sarah tried to distract herself with a book, but she couldn't stop thinking about the woman in the graveyard and Mrs. Montgomery's warning. She finally decided to go to bed, hoping to sleep off the tension in her mind. But as soon as she lay down, she heard something, a faint tapping. At first it seemed distant, like it was coming from the floorboards beneath her. But then the tapping grew louder, closer. It was unmistakable. Someone, or something, was tapping on her window. Frozen with fear, Sarah slowly turned toward the window. The curtain was drawn, but the faintest silhouette appeared in the glass, tall, thin, and unmistakably wearing white. Her heart raced as she scrambled out of bed, terrified. She grabbed her phone and called the village sheriff, a gruff man named Ben Marshall, who had warned her about the old stories when she first moved in. His voice sounded groggy when he answered, but when she explained what was happening, he seemed more alert. "I'll be there in a minute," he said, hanging up. Within minutes, Ben was at the door, and Sarah led him to the window. They looked outside, but there was no sign of the figure, only the dark, empty field stretched out before them, the wind gently rustling the trees. Ben stepped back, his face tense. "You've seen her, haven't you?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded, heart pounding. "Who is she? What does she want?" Ben sighed, rubbing his forehead. "The woman in white is more than just a ghost. She's part of the village's dark past, a tragedy that goes back hundreds of years. She's the spirit of a woman who was wronged. Her name was Eliza. She was betrayed, left to die alone in that graveyard, and ever since her spirit has been restless. They say she's a warning. If she taps on your window, it means something terrible is coming." Ben didn't elaborate further, but Sarah didn't need to hear more. She already felt the weight of the curse that had followed her to Wrenbury. The strange occurrences, the whispers, the unsettling feeling that had settled over the village. It was all connected to that ghost. For the next few days, Sarah was on edge. The tapping continued every night, each time growing louder, more urgent. She stayed up late watching the window, but never saw the woman again. She tried to leave the village, but the road leading out always seemed to vanish into thick fog. Then, one evening, as she stood in the garden, she noticed something strange. A figure standing at the edge of the field. It wasn't the woman in white, but a man, tall and thin, watching her from a distance. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Before she could react, he was gone. The next day, she packed her things. She couldn't stay another moment in that cursed village. She drove to the nearest town, determined to never return to Wrenbury. But when she looked into the rearview mirror, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure standing just outside the car, the woman in white, her face now clear, staring back at her with hollow eyes. And just as quickly as she had appeared, the figure vanished. Sarah never made it out of Wrenbury. She was last seen driving toward the village boundary, but no one knows for sure what happened to her. Some say she became a part of the village's curse. Others believe the woman in white finally claimed her. But one thing is certain: Wrenbury still hides its secrets. And if you ever find yourself in the English countryside, wandering past an old church, be careful what you look for in the graveyard. You might not like what you see. This is the story of Mark Walters, a man who swore he'd never step foot into his childhood home again, but did, and lived just long enough to regret it. I'm telling you this because I was there. Not in the house, but I knew Mark. We worked together for years, and I still remember the day he walked into the office with that pale, distant look in his eyes, like his soul had seen something it couldn't forget. That was the Monday after he spent the weekend at the old Walters house. Let me start from the beginning. Mark grew up in a house on the outskirts of Yorkshire, near a line of woods people always whispered about. Strange things live in those trees, the locals used to say. But as a kid, Mark didn't believe it. Until the night his little sister Emily disappeared. He was 10, she was 7. One stormy night, their parents left them alone for a couple of hours just to grab groceries. The power went out. Mark lit candles. Emily went to the upstairs bathroom. And then, she never came back. No scream, no sound, just gone. Police searched for weeks. No signs of forced entry, no tracks. It was like she had vanished into thin air. Mark told them he heard soft singing upstairs that night, but when they asked more, he froze up. couldn't explain. He just kept saying, "She went into the mirror." After that, the family broke. His parents divorced. Mark was sent to live with his aunt. He never returned to the house again until 30 years later. That year, his father died. The house, long abandoned, was left to him in the will. He didn't want it, hadn't thought about it in years. But something about the way his father mentioned it, "You need to see it for yourself," made him feel like there was unfinished business. So he went back. He drove up Friday evening. The house was falling apart. Roof caved in, windows boarded, weeds taller than a man. He said the air around it felt thick, like it didn't want him there. But still, he went in. He brought a flashlight, a sleeping bag, and a digital voice recorder, just in case. The first floor was dusty, filled with broken furniture and mold. But the second floor, that's where things started to feel wrong. He said every room felt watched. The walls still had his and Emily's drawings, stick figures and suns, and a big mirror they'd painted around like it was a magical door. That mirror was still there, cracked down the center, but untouched by time. No dust, no grime, just cold. He set up his recorder in that room and talked. He talked about Emily, about that night, about how guilty he still felt, and while he was talking, the recorder caught something else, a soft voice, childlike, whispering one word, "Mark." He didn't hear it then, only found out later when he played it back. That night, he slept downstairs, but around 2:14 a.m., the recorder upstairs clicked on by itself. The red light blinked, and it caught the sound of footsteps, slow, soft, as if bare feet were walking across the wood. Then it recorded humming, a tune Mark remembered from his childhood, a lullaby his mother used to sing, but twisted, slower, off-key, then a whisper, "Come back." Mark woke up moments later to find the front door wide open. He thought someone had broken in. He grabbed a rusted fire poker and went upstairs, but nothing was there, except the mirror, which now had a child-sized handprint on the inside of the glass. He swore he saw something move behind it, a shape, almost human, standing in a foggy room that shouldn't exist. He backed away, stumbled, ran down the stairs, and spent the rest of the night in his locked car. He told me this in detail, stone-cold sober. No exaggeration. I could see the fear still fresh in his eyes. But here's where it gets worse. The next morning, he called a demolition company. He wanted the mirror shattered, the house gone. They came out on Monday. 3 workers went into the upstairs room. One man took a sledgehammer to the mirror and froze. He dropped the hammer, started laughing. Not normal laughter, hysterical, high-pitched, like a child imitating a man. Then he turned and walked into the mirror, except the mirror hadn't shattered. He just walked through the glass and vanished. The others ran, swore they saw him disappear like smoke. Police came. Investigation started. But there was no evidence, no fingerprints, no damage, just an old mirror, perfectly clean. That night, Mark called me. He was shaking, whispering. Said he heard Emily's voice again. She was calling from inside the mirror, asking him to come in and play. He hung up mid-sentence. I drove to his place the next morning. His apartment was empty. The door was locked from the inside. No signs of a struggle, no broken windows, nothing out of place, except for a small mirror on the floor, one I'd never seen before. On the glass, written in condensation, were the words, "Come play with me, big brother," and a single handprint, small, like a child's. They never found Mark, just like they never found Emily. But here's what still chills me. I took that small mirror, wrapped it in cloth, and put it in the back of my closet, thinking it was some sick joke. But last week, it fogged up on its own, and someone wrote my name on the inside. So if someone ever tells you a story about an old house with a mirror that shows things that shouldn't exist, believe them. Because I did. And now, it's too late. This is the story of Claire Jennings, a school teacher from a small town in Vermont. What happened to her one summer was so unsettling, so hard to explain, that even today, the locals refuse to talk about it. But I know the details. I heard them, from Claire herself, just weeks before she vanished. Claire was the kind of person who didn't believe in ghosts, demons, or anything paranormal. She was practical, organized, and calm under pressure. She lived alone, had a few close friends, and filled her weekends with gardening and books. That summer, she decided to take a break from her routine and spend a few weeks in the countryside, in a cabin she'd rented online, quiet, peaceful, and perfect for some solitude. The cabin sat deep in the woods, miles away from the nearest town. It was old but charming, with creaky floors, wooden walls, and a small fireplace. The previous owner had left behind shelves of books and an old piano covered in dust. It looked like no one had stayed there in years. The first few days were peaceful. Claire explored the trails, took photos of wildflowers, and read on the porch. But on the fourth night, something strange happened. She was brushing her teeth in the bathroom when she heard a knock. Not at the front door, but on the back of the house, the part with no deck where the trees grew thick. She froze, toothbrush still in hand. Another knock. Then silence. She waited, thinking maybe it was an animal, but she had a feeling deep in her chest, like something wasn't right. She grabbed her flashlight and opened the back door. Nothing, just trees, darkness, stillness. She shut the door and locked it, told herself it was probably just a raccoon or a branch falling. But the feeling in her chest didn't go away. The next night it happened again. Same knock, same spot, same silence when she opened the door. But this time, when she checked the ground with her flashlight, she saw something. Footprints. Bare, human, leading into the trees. She didn't sleep that night. The next morning she packed her things. She wanted to leave, but her car wouldn't start. Dead battery, no cell signal. She was stuck. She tried to hike back to town, but twisted her ankle just an hour in. Limping back, she told herself she was overreacting. There were no signs of forced entry. Maybe the footprints were old. Maybe her mind was playing tricks on her. That night, it wasn't a knock. It was humming. A low, tuneless hum, coming from outside. She turned off all the lights, sat by the window with a kitchen knife, heart pounding. The humming moved around the cabin, slow and steady, circling it like someone was walking just beyond the walls. And then, the humming stopped. She waited. Then came a voice, soft, just loud enough to hear. Claire. Her blood turned cold. She had never told anyone she was here. No one knew. She bolted the doors, closed the curtains, sat in a corner of the cabin with every light on. She didn't sleep. The voice didn't return, but now she knew. Someone was watching her. The next day, Desperate, she searched the cabin top to bottom, looking for a phone, a weapon, anything. In the small attic behind an old trunk, she found a box wrapped in cloth. Inside were photos, hundreds of them, all of the same cabin, different seasons, different years, but one thing was common in all of them. There was always a person standing in the background, barefoot, watching the cabin from the trees. In some photos he was closer, in others, further away, but always there, always watching, and in the final photo, he was standing right outside the window. Claire screamed, dropped the photo. In the silence that followed, she heard it again, humming. She didn't look out the window. She couldn't. Instead, she turned to the old trunk. It was locked. She smashed it open. Inside were notebooks, dozens of them, diaries maybe, each written in shaky handwriting. They told the same story, different names, different years, but always the same cabin, the same footprints, the same voice calling their name at night. None of the writers had been able to leave. One journal ended mid-sentence. He's inside the house now. I saw him in the mirror, but when I turned around, Claire slammed the trunk shut. She didn't know what was happening or who the barefoot man was, but she knew she had to get out. She limped out of the cabin, flashlight in hand, ignoring the pain. She walked for hours. No trail, no road, just trees, and then suddenly, a light. A ranger's cabin. She collapsed on the porch, pounding the door until someone opened it. A man, middle-aged, confused. She told him everything. The knocks, the voice, the photos, the journals. He listened, nodded slowly, then said the words that made her stomach drop. "You're not the first one to come running out of that place." He explained that the cabin had a history. People went there, but they didn't always come back. Some were found wandering. Others disappeared completely. One man had clawed his own eyes out, screaming about something inside the walls. They'd tried to shut it down, but the land was private. The listing kept going back up. The owners were never reachable. Like the place just wanted someone to stay. The ranger drove her to town. She got medical help, then called her sister to come pick her up. Claire never went back to that cabin. But here's the part that's hard to explain. 2 weeks later, she went to get her photos developed. The ones she'd taken on those peaceful first days. They were beautiful. Forest trails, birds, flowers, but in the background of almost every picture, a man. Barefoot, standing just at the edge of the frame, watching her. She burned the photos. She changed her phone number, moved to another state. But one night, months later, she woke up to humming outside her window. That was the last time anyone heard from Claire Jennings. They found her house unlocked. No sign of struggle. Just a set of wet, barefoot footprints leading from the window to her empty bed. So if you ever see a listing for a peaceful cabin in Vermont, cheap, remote, great. For solo trips, don't go, because he's still out there and he knows your name now. This is the story of Thomas Riley, a quiet man from Devon who never believed in anything supernatural until the day he inherited his uncle's house. Now I need you to listen closely, because what happened in that house was so strange, so disturbing, it still haunts me just telling it. Thomas wasn't close to his Uncle Edward. The man had lived alone in a crumbling stone house deep in the woods, far from anyone. Some said he was a bit of a recluse. Others whispered that he was obsessed with the dead. Thomas hadn't seen him in years when the lawyer called, telling him Edward had passed away and left everything to him. He took a week off work, packed his things, and drove down to the countryside. The house was exactly what he expected. Cold, dusty, full of cobwebs and old books. But it was also strange. You know that feeling you get when you walk into a room and suddenly feel like someone's watching you? Thomas felt that constantly. He brushed it off. The house was ancient. Old floorboards creak. Cold spots happen. Shadows shift. Nothing unusual. Until the first night. Thomas couldn't sleep. The wind outside was howling. The trees near the windows scratched against the glass like fingernails. He got up to check the windows and noticed something odd in the hallway mirror. It wasn't broken or foggy, but his reflection was just a little delayed. Like it was, reacting half a second too late. He laughed to himself. Old house, old mirror, stop being silly, he muttered and went back to bed. But when he woke up the next morning, something was scratched into the mirror's surface. Don't trust the mirror. Thomas stared at it. He hadn't done that. He lived alone. The doors had been locked all night. Who could have done it? Still, he tried to stay calm. He told himself maybe it had been there all along and he just missed it. He wiped it off even though the scratches were deep. That day, he kept himself busy sorting through his uncle's papers, boxes, and journals. And that's when things started getting stranger. In the attic, he found a stack of old journals, his uncle's handwriting, tight and rushed. One journal caught his eye. It was titled simply, "The Other Side." Inside, page after page talked about mirrors, not as reflections, but as gateways. Edward believed mirrors weren't just glass and silver. They were thin windows into another realm, a dark one. One where things lived, waiting, watching. Thomas felt a chill in his chest as he read. Once you open the way, they see you. Don't stare too long. Don't speak to them. And whatever you do, never let them through. That night, the air in the house felt heavier, like it was pressing against his chest. He tried not to look into the mirror. He covered it with a sheet. But around 2 a.m. he heard a soft thump, then another, like something tapping on the mirror. He sat up in bed, heart racing. The sound continued. Tap, tap, tap. Finally, he grabbed a flashlight and went to the hallway. The sheet was on the floor. The mirror was uncovered, and something was inside it. It wasn't his reflection. It looked like him, yes, but its eyes were wrong. Too wide, too black, and its smile stretched too far. It lifted its hand and tapped the inside of the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Thomas ran back to his room and didn't come out until morning. The next day, he called the lawyer and demanded answers. The man sounded uneasy. I didn't want to say anything, but your uncle started acting strangely in his last year. He boarded up mirrors, refused to enter certain rooms. He kept saying something had crossed over. Did anyone else ever see it? No one stayed. Long enough. Most visitors left after one night. You've lasted longer than any of them. That night, Thomas decided to record the hallway. He set up his phone across from the mirror and went to bed. When he checked the footage the next morning, it showed nothing for the first few hours, just the still hallway, quiet and dark. Then at 3:04 a.m., the sheet lifted on its own. No wind, no movement in the house. It just floated up and fell behind the mirror. Then his reflection, only it wasn't him, stepped out of the glass. It stood there, staring at the camera, head tilted, smiling. Then it walked down the hallway and out of view. Thomas froze. He checked the locks, all closed. He searched the house but found nothing out of place. But when he returned to the hallway, his Reflection was back in the mirror, standing still, smiling again, and when he moved, it didn't. It just watched. He left that day, drove to the nearest town and booked a hotel room. But things didn't get better. That night, as he passed a mirror in the hotel bathroom, the light flickered and his reflection blinked before he did. He smashed the mirror with a towel and left immediately. Over the next few weeks, things got worse. Any mirror, any reflective surface, he saw the same figure. Sometimes it mimicked him, sometimes it didn't. He went to doctors, therapists, even spiritual healers. No one believed him. But one old woman, a retired historian, told him something chilling. There are stories of this, from as far back as Roman times. They called it the hollow reflection. A spirit that watches you from the other side of the mirror. It learns from you. And if you ever stop reflecting it, it takes your place. Is that what happened to my uncle? He asked. She only nodded. You can't run from it, she said. Once it sees you, it never stops. The only way to escape is to break every reflection it can reach. Live without mirrors, live without your reflection. So that's what Thomas did. He moved again and again. He avoids shops with windows, hotels with mirrors, even puddles of water. He hasn't seen his face in over a year, but sometimes, in the corner of his eye, he swears he sees it, a flash of his own face. Smiling. Wrong. Waiting. Now you may be wondering why I'm telling you this. You remember that antique mirror you picked up last week? Check it. Look closely. Is your reflection just a little too slow? Is it smiling when you're not? If it is, don't turn your back, because once it steps through, you won't get to step back. This is the story of Olivia Hart, a friend of a friend, someone I didn't know well but ended up hearing everything about. And once you hear what happened to her, you won't forget it. I've never told this story to anyone out loud, not because I don't believe it, but because I still don't know if she ever truly came back from it. It started when Olivia moved into a new apartment in a small town outside Manchester. She was 26, just starting a job at a local publishing house. The apartment wasn't big, just a one-bedroom flat in an old brick building. Nothing fancy. But it had charm, and Olivia liked that it was quiet. Too quiet, maybe. From the very first week, strange things started happening. Nothing huge, just small, subtle things. Her bathroom mirror would be foggy when she hadn't taken a shower. The kitchen tap would drip even though she'd tightened it. The hallway light flickered, always between midnight and 1 a.m. She mentioned it once to her co-worker, Ella, kind of jokingly. But Ella didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned in and said, "Wait, what building did you say you live in?" Olivia told her the address, and Ella's face changed. "That's the old Greenwich building, isn't it?" she asked. Olivia nodded. Ella lowered her voice. "There was a woman who used to live in your flat. Rachel Layton. She disappeared." Olivia asked, "When?" Ella said, 4 years ago. Just vanished. Left her phone, purse, keys, everything. Her flat was locked from the inside. That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She told herself it was a coincidence. People go missing all the time, and old buildings have their quirks. She wasn't going to scare herself over a story from 4 years ago, but deep down, something didn't feel right. 2 nights later, it got worse. Olivia woke up to the sound of humming. It was soft, like a lullaby, and it was coming from the hallway. At first, she thought it was coming from outside her flat. Maybe a neighbor. But when she got out of bed and opened her bedroom door, the humming stopped. And then, her hallway light clicked off, just like that. Darkness. She reached for the switch. Nothing. Her fingers felt cold, like the air around her had dropped 10 degrees. Then she heard it again. The humming. But this time, it was coming from her bathroom. She turned, heart pounding, and walked slowly down the hall. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone to use the flashlight. The humming got louder, softer, then louder again, like it was moving inside the walls. She pushed open the bathroom door. No one there. Just the mirror, fogged up. And across the surface of the mirror, like someone had dragged a finger through the steam, were the words, "She never left." Olivia backed out of the bathroom, slammed the door shut, and ran back to her room. She didn't sleep at all. The next morning she called the landlord, but he just laughed. "That place is just old," he said. "The pipes make noise. The lights are fussy. You'll get used to it." But she didn't. The next night her closet door creaked open on its own. She checked it. No draft, no loose hinges. But later, when she woke again at 3:12 a.m., the closet door was wide open, and her clothes were swaying gently, like someone had just brushed past them. And there, in the middle of her closet floor, was a pair of muddy footprints. Small, bare, like a woman's. Olivia left the apartment that morning and checked into a hotel, but the nightmares followed her. Every night she dreamed she was standing in her hallway, facing the bathroom mirror. Only this time, when she looked into it, she didn't see herself. She saw a woman with long black hair soaking wet, her eyes pale and lifeless, staring back at her. And every time, she would whisper something Olivia couldn't quite hear. Something like, "Why did you come here?" By now, Olivia was panicking. She begged her boss to let her work remotely. She started researching Rachel Layton, the missing woman. There were no crime reports, no official investigation, just a few old blog posts from local forums. One said Rachel had become paranoid before she vanished. Another said she believed something was living in her mirror. And one post, written anonymously, simply said, "Granick doesn't let go. The woman in the mirror takes what she needs. If you see her, don't look back." Olivia tried to break her lease. The landlord refused. She even had a priest bless the apartment. He lasted 15 minutes inside before walking out, pale and shaking, saying, "There's something wrong in that place, something that doesn't want to leave." Finally, Olivia went back one last time to grab her belongings and never return. I don't know exactly what happened that night, but I know what she told her mother afterward, and I've never forgotten it. She said she walked in and found her bathroom door wide open. The mirror was covered in steam, even though no one had used the shower. She called out, "Rachel?" and the humming started again. Olivia said she saw her own reflection smile at her, but her face wasn't moving. Then, the lights cut out. She tried to run, but the hallway felt like it stretched forever, like she was running through a tunnel that had no end. The walls whispered. She said she heard laughter behind her, and a voice saying over and over, "You're next. You're next. You're next." She made it out. Barely. But she wasn't the same after. She doesn't talk much now. Moved back to her parents' place in Cornwall. Doesn't answer calls from old friends. Doesn't go near mirrors. Sometimes, her mom says, she'll cover all the reflective surfaces in the house. She doesn't sleep without the lights on. And once, Her mother found her standing in the hallway at 3 a.m., staring at nothing, whispering, "She's still watching." They say Rachel Layton was never found, but Olivia says she didn't vanish. She was taken, and the woman in the mirror is still there, waiting for the next one. So if you ever move into an old building and the mirrors start fogging up on their own, don't wipe them clean, and whatever you do, don't answer the humming. This is the story of a man named Daniel Foster, and I need you to listen closely, because what happened to him might sound simple at first, but it still haunts me to this day. I don't know if it was supernatural, psychological, or something in between, but I know it was real. Daniel was a freelance journalist who loved odd stories, urban legends, unexplained mysteries, that kind of thing. He had written articles on haunted lighthouses, cursed paintings, and abandoned towns, but nothing had ever truly scared him. That changed when he received a strange email late one night. The subject line was, "You're not supposed to see this." The message said only, "There's a house in Easton Grove. No address, no number. You'll know it when you see it. Stay one night. Write what you see. If you make it till morning, you'll understand." No name, no sender info, but attached was a single photo, a blurry image of an old house sitting alone on a hill surrounded by trees. The house looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Broken windows, sagging roof, paint peeling off the walls. Most people would delete that email without thinking, but Daniel was curious. Too curious. So the next morning, he packed his car, grabbed his camera and recorder, and drove to Easton Grove. It was a quiet town in the countryside, one of those places where even the gas station guy looks like he's keeping secrets. He asked around about the house. Most people just shook their heads or acted like they hadn't heard him. But one old man sitting outside a diner looked up and said, "You're talking about the house with no doorbell, right? Don't go up there." Daniel asked why. The old man said, "Because the house remembers you, and it doesn't like to be disturbed." That should have been enough, but of course it wasn't. Daniel drove out toward the woods until he saw it. No road led up to it, just a dirt path through thick trees. But the house was exactly as it looked in the photo. Old, broken, forgotten by time. He parked and walked up, camera rolling. When he reached the front steps, something felt heavy, like the air had weight, like it didn't want him there. Still, he went in. The front door creaked open like it had been waiting. The inside was worse. Dust everywhere. Furniture covered in white sheets, a cracked mirror in the hallway. But no animals, no bugs, no sound. That silence, it wasn't peaceful. It was pressing, like the house was holding its breath. Daniel explored room by room, taking notes. The kitchen had a table set for dinner. Dust-covered plates, rotten silverware. The living room had a fireplace with ashes still inside, as if someone had been there not too long ago. But no one was. Around 8 p.m., Daniel decided to set up in the bedroom upstairs. He left his camera in the hallway, aimed at the stairs, and turned on his recorder beside the bed. At 2:14 a.m., the recorder picked up a sound. Footsteps, slow, steady, coming up the stairs. Daniel woke up thinking it was part of a dream. But then, he heard it too. Creak, creak, creak. The sound of something heavy walking down the hallway just outside the room. He stayed still, held his breath. The doorknob turned, but no one came in. Just the knob turning back and forth, as if someone was trying to decide whether or not to open it. Then silence. Daniel stayed awake until morning. At first light, he bolted out of the house, camera and recorder in hand, and drove straight back to his apartment in London. He thought it was over, but when he reviewed the footage from the hallway camera, his blood ran cold. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the footage showed a shadow on the wall. It wasn't shaped like a person. Not exactly. It was too tall, too thin, and it bent in ways shadows shouldn't bend. It moved slowly, like it was dragging itself. And the whispering, he hadn't heard it in person, but the camera picked it up clearly, a voice breathy and low saying, "You let me in, now I remember you." That night, Daniel started having dreams, the same dream every night. He was back in the house, standing in the hallway. Only this time, the furniture was gone. The windows were bricked up. And at the end of the hall, the shadow stood waiting. It would whisper his name, and then it would smile. But worst of all, when Daniel would wake up, his feet would be covered in dirt. Like he had walked barefoot through the woods. He went to doctors, sleep therapists, even a priest. But nothing stopped the dreams, and each time he woke up, there'd be more dirt. Scratches on his ankles, leaves in his bed. He tried deleting the footage, destroying the recorder. Didn't work. He moved apartments, changed cities, still followed. He tried ignoring it. But one night he came home to find a note on his pillow. Same handwriting as the original email. It said, "You wrote what you saw. Now it's your story too." That was the last time I spoke to Daniel in person. He stopped answering calls, shut down his blog, vanished from social media. 2 months later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photo, a picture of me standing in front of my house, taken from a distance, at night, and written on the back, in that same shaky handwriting. Now it remembers you. So if someone ever tells you about a house in Easton Grove, don't go looking for it, and if you ever get an email that says you're not supposed to see this, whatever you do, don't open the attachment. This is the story of a woman named Claire Henderson. And I swear to you, what happened to her is something I wouldn't believe myself if I hadn't heard it directly from her lips. It started in a quiet town, on a quiet night, with a quiet knock at the door. But nothing that followed was quiet. Claire had just moved into a small house in the countryside outside Oxford. She wanted to get away from the noise of city life. The house was old, with wooden floors that creaked when you walked and tall windows that whined in the wind. But Claire didn't mind. She said it felt peaceful, like the place had a soul. She lived alone, worked from home, and liked the silence. But sometimes silence can stretch too long. Sometimes it can pull at the edges of your mind. It began on a Tuesday evening. She had just finished dinner, was washing dishes when she heard it. The knock. Not loud, just 3 slow, deliberate taps on the front door. She peeked through the peephole. No one. She opened the door anyway. Still no one. But lying on the porch was a small folded note. No name. No envelope. Just a plain white piece of paper. She opened it. It said in shaky handwriting, "Let me in. Just for a moment." Claire laughed it off. Maybe a prank from some local kid. She tossed the note and went to bed. But the next night, it happened again. Same knock, same number 3. This time the note was a little different. "Please, I need warmth." She didn't laugh this time. It was odd. Too odd. She called her friend Olivia, who lived in town. Olivia told her to install a camera just in case. Claire agreed. The next morning, she picked up a cheap motion-detecting door camera and set it up. That night, she sat on the couch, wide awake, waiting. At exactly 9:47 p.m., the camera light blinked. Someone, or something, was at the door. She rushed to check the feed on her phone. What she saw made her freeze. There was someone there. A woman. But not quite. She was tall and thin, wearing an old-fashioned dress that looked almost Victorian. Her hair was wild and her face was blurry, as if the camera couldn't quite focus on it. But the worst part? She wasn't knocking. She was just standing there, perfectly still, arms by her side, staring. Claire didn't open the door. She didn't move. After 2 minutes, the figure walked away. Slowly, like she had all the time in the world. Claire called Olivia again and begged her to come over. Olivia agreed to stay the night. Together, they watched the footage over and over. Same figure, same blank stare. No footsteps, no sound. It was like she appeared and vanished without disturbing the air. The next day, Claire contacted the police. They came, reviewed the footage, walked the perimeter. They found no footprints, no sign anyone had been there. They told Claire it was probably a glitch, maybe someone playing tricks. But that night, the knocking returned. And this time, the note wasn't on the porch. It was slipped under the door. Claire opened it with trembling hands. "You saw me. Now I'm part of you." She didn't sleep at all that night. The following days got worse. The figure came back every night, always at the same time. Always staring. Sometimes she knocked, sometimes she just stood there watching. Claire began hearing whispers inside her house, faint, like they were coming from inside the walls. She stopped working, stopped eating properly. Olivia stayed for a few more nights, but then left after something followed her home. She swore she saw the same figure standing at the end of her driveway, just watching, arms limp by her sides. Claire called a local historian, desperate to find answers. He told her something chilling. Back in the 1800s, a woman named Eleanor Blackwell had lived on that land. She was accused of witchcraft, though no evidence was ever found. Villagers said she wandered door to door, begging to be let in, claiming she was cold and had nowhere to go. No one ever opened their door. She died alone in the woods behind the property during a snowstorm. Her last words, as recorded in old journals, were, "Let me in, just for a moment." Claire now knew what she was dealing with. She decided to confront it. On the 7th night, Claire stayed by the door, flashlight in hand, phone ready to record. The knock came 3 times. She opened the door. No one. But then, cold. A blast of wind that wasn't wind. It moved through her. Her flashlight flickered. She turned around to go back inside and froze. The figure was already inside, standing in the hallway. Claire dropped the flashlight and screamed. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The woman's face was visible now, not blurry anymore. Pale, stretched, mouth slightly open, eyes completely black. She whispered, "You saw me. You let me in." Claire passed out. She woke up on the floor an hour later. Dokri, wide open, house freezing. But the woman was gone. She called Olivia. Olivia found Claire shivering, skin ice cold, mumbling about how she was inside me now. Claire was never the same after that. She moved out, changed her number, avoided mirrors, refused to talk about that week. But sometimes, late at night, I get messages from her. Short ones. Like, she still watches me. She's in the corner of my room. I hear her breathe when I sleep. I tried to visit her once. She didn't answer the door, but I saw something from the street, a note stuck to the front window, written in that same shaky handwriting. Don't open the door, not even a crack. So if you ever hear 3 knocks on your door and no one is there, don't be curious, don't check, and for the love of everything, don't open it. This is the story of something that happened to my cousin, James. And trust me, I wouldn't be telling you this if I hadn't seen what it did to him afterward. He wasn't the same. Not after what happened that night. James had always been the brave one in our family. He'd go into dark basements, explore old abandoned buildings, even walk alone through the woods at night just to prove he wasn't scared. But sometimes the worst things don't happen in the dark. Sometimes they happen in plain daylight, when you least expect them. It all started when James got a new job as a real estate photographer. Basically, he'd drive out to homes that were going up for sale and take pictures inside and out. One Thursday, his boss asked him to photograph an old house just outside a small town called Ridgewood. It was a little isolated, surrounded by trees, and had been empty for a few years. But the owner had recently passed away, and now the family wanted to sell. James didn't think twice. It was just another house, just another set of pictures. He arrived at the house around 2 in the afternoon. The place looked old but not abandoned. Paint peeling, tall grass, dusty windows. The front door creaked when he opened it. He stepped inside, and the first thing he noticed was the smell. Not rotten or moldy, just old. Like books and closed up air. The house was quiet. Too quiet. But again, that didn't bother James. He started snapping photos. Living room, kitchen, hallway. Nothing strange. But then he got to the staircase. There, right at the bottom of the steps, was a small wooden doll. Just sitting there, legs stretched out, facing the wall. At first, he thought the family had forgotten to clean up their kids' toys. But when he picked it up to move it, he noticed something weird. The doll had no eyes, just 2 empty holes where they should have been. Still, James shrugged it off. Creepy, sure, but nothing supernatural. He placed it on a nearby shelf and moved. On upstairs, he found 3 bedrooms. 2 were empty. But the third one, that's where things started to change. The door to the last room was closed. James opened it slowly, and immediately, the temperature dropped. Like, really dropped. From warm summer air to ice-cold breath in seconds. He stood there for a moment. The room had old wallpaper, a rusted bed frame, and a rocking chair in the corner. And the rocking chair was moving, just slightly, back and forth. Now James told himself it could have been the wind. Maybe he caused it when he opened the door. That's what anyone would think, right? So he walked in trying to act normal, lifted the camera and took a photo. Click. But the moment the flash went off, he heard something. A whisper. So soft, he almost thought he imagined it. Don't take pictures. He spun around. No one, nothing. Just the creaking sound of the chair still rocking behind him. He laughed it off again, said something like, "Okay, maybe this place is just messing with me." He took 2 more pictures and left the room. Back downstairs, he grabbed a few final shots of the outside of the house. As he was about to leave, he noticed something that made his stomach turn. The doll was back. Not on the shelf where he had left it, but sitting right at the bottom of the stairs again. Same position, same eyeless face. That was it. He didn't want to waste another second. He packed up and left, not even bothering to turn off the lights. That night, around 11 p.m., he called me. He sounded off, like his voice was hollow. "Hey," he said, "I need to tell you something." He explained everything I just told. I laughed a little and told him maybe he needed a break. But then he said something that made me go silent. "I checked the photos," he said. "All the pictures I took upstairs, they're gone." "Gone? Like deleted?" "No," he said. "Not deleted, replaced." I asked him what he meant. He said the files were still there, same size, same timestamp. But instead of showing the rooms, they all showed the same image, a black background, and in the center, the doll. But now it had eyes that looked too real. Human, almost. And in the corner of each image was a shadow, like someone was standing just off frame. I didn't know what to say. I told him to reset his camera, maybe run a virus check on his computer. He just whispered, "I didn't upload the pictures. They appeared on my computer before I got home." The next day, I drove over to check on him. When I arrived, he looked pale. He hadn't slept. Said he kept hearing footsteps in his apartment. And the worst part? He found the doll, sitting at the foot of his bed. I saw it with my own eyes. Same eyeless face, small wooden body, sitting there like it had every right to be in his home. We burned it, took it out behind his building, doused it with lighter fluid, and set it on fire. We watched it crack and crumble into ash. That night, James finally got some sleep, but in the morning when he opened his front door to get his paper, there it was, the doll, clean, whole, staring up at him. After that, James started losing it. He quit his job, stopped leaving the apartment, covered every mirror, refused to use electronics, and the photos kept showing up. He stopped using a camera, but still, images of that doll, sometimes with blood-red eyes, sometimes surrounded by shadows, kept appearing. On his phone, his TV, once even on the bathroom mirror, like it had been written in steam. We tried everything, priests, psychics. One guy told us the house had once belonged to a woman who lost her child. The only thing she kept after the funeral was his favorite toy, a wooden doll she made by hand. After her death, people said they saw her sitting in that room, rocking back and forth, whispering to someone who wasn't there. We moved James out of his apartment, got him therapy, new phone, new everything. But he still sees it, sometimes outside his window, sometimes in his dreams, and sometimes in photos he never took. So, if you ever find an old house with a room that feels colder than the rest, and a doll that doesn't belong to anyone, don't pick it up, don't touch it, and whatever you do, don't take its picture. This is the story of something real, something that happened to a friend of mine named Arjun back in 2017. And I'm telling you, this isn't the kind of story you hear and forget. It grabs you. It lingers in your mind long after it's over, because what happened to him could happen to anyone. Arjun was a quiet guy, not the kind to believe in ghosts or spirits. He was an engineer, always logical, always grounded. One weekend, he decided to visit his family's old farmhouse in the countryside of Maharashtra. The house had been empty for almost 5 years, after his uncle passed away, but it was still in decent condition. His plan was simple: clean the place up, maybe stay for a night or two, then come back to Mumbai. But the moment he stepped inside, things felt off. You know that feeling when a place just doesn't feel right? Like the walls are watching. That's how he described it. The house was silent. Too silent. No birds, no wind, just stillness. The first night, everything was fine. He swept the floors, fixed a broken window, even cooked some instant noodles on the old stove. Around midnight, he heard something strange, a soft knocking sound, like someone tapping on the door. He froze. The house was in the middle of nowhere. The nearest neighbor was 2 kilometers away. Who would be knocking at this hour? He quietly walked to the front door, peeked through the crack in the curtain, but no one was there. He chalked it up to nerves, maybe an animal, or the wind. He went back to bed, but just as he was drifting off, the knocking came again. This time faster, urgent. Knock, 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 knock. Again, he rushed to the door. Again, nothing. That night, he barely slept. The next morning, he explored the house more thoroughly. In the back of the house, there was a locked room. The key was still hanging from a nail on the wall nearby, so he opened it. It was dark, dusty. The air inside smelled like something had been dead for years. But the strangest thing? The room was empty, except for a chair. Just one wooden chair, sitting in the center of the room, facing the wall. He didn't like that. He closed the door and locked it again. But that's when things started getting worse. That night, the knocking didn't come from the front door. It came from inside the house. He heard it from the hallway, then the kitchen, then terrifyingly from the door to the locked room. Knock, knock, knock. He stood still, every hair on his body standing up. The knocks were slow and spaced out, like whatever was knocking wanted him to hear each one clearly. He grabbed his phone to call someone, anyone, but there was no signal. Not even one bar. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. Silence again. He tried to calm himself down, told himself maybe it was just the old house creaking. But deep down, he knew better. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the main room with a flashlight in his hand, eyes fixed on the hallway. Around 3 a.m., he swore he heard whispering. Not voices, whispers. Soft, distant. Like 2 people having a conversation just out of reach. But the scariest part, he recognized one of the voices. It was his uncle's. You see, his uncle had passed away in that house. Heart attack. Alone. Arjun had always felt guilty for not visiting him more. Now here he was, hearing his uncle's voice, whispering behind walls that should have been empty. The next morning, he made up his mind. He was going to leave. Whatever was going on, he didn't want any part of it. But when he walked outside, something was wrong. The road was gone. Where there had been a dirt road leading out through the trees, there was now nothing but thick forest. Tall, dark trees where there hadn't been any the day before. He walked in circles for an hour, trying to find his way out. But every direction led him back to the house. It was like the place had trapped him. As the sun set, a storm rolled in. Heavy rain, loud thunder, flashes of lightning. And with every lightning flash, he saw it. A figure. Standing near the back of the house. Just for a split second, every time the sky lit up. It wasn't his uncle. This thing was taller. Its arms were too long, and it didn't move. Just stared. He stayed locked inside, trembling, the entire night. But here's where it gets worse. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the knocking returned. Not on the door. On the walls, all around him, like someone or something was moving through the house, knocking as it went. And then, His phone rang. No signal, no network, but it rang. He picked it up and answered with a shaky, "Hello?" All he heard was his uncle's voice, whispering, "Come sit in the chair." That was it. That's all it said, over and over. "Come sit in the chair." Arjun dropped the phone. He didn't sleep. He sat in the corner of the room, flashlight pointed at the hallway, praying. For morning, when the sun finally rose, everything was normal again. The road was back. The trees were where they belonged. The forest looked like it did on the first day. He grabbed his bag and ran. He didn't look back, didn't stop until he was in his car and miles away from the farmhouse. He never returned. He told me this story a week later, swearing every word was true. And here's the part that gives me chills even now. When he checked his phone history, there was no call log, no missed calls, no incoming calls. But there was one outgoing message he didn't remember sending. It had just 2 words. "I'm coming." Sent at 3:34 a.m. to his own number. He never figured out how it happened. The farmhouse still stands, empty and quiet. The chair is probably still in that back room. But if you ever find yourself near that part of the countryside, and someone offers to let you stay in an old family home, say no, because some places remember the dead, and some places don't like being forgotten. This is the story of something so strange, so disturbing that I still don't know how to fully explain it. I'm going to tell you everything, just as it happened to my cousin Lisa. And trust me, once you hear this, you won't forget it. It's one of those stories that sticks in your mind, whether you want it to or not. So Lisa is a travel blogger. She loves going to remote places, old towns, abandoned buildings, you name it. She always says, the weirder the place, the better the story. But after what happened in 2019, she doesn't say that anymore. That summer, Lisa was driving through northern Maine, looking for old roadside towns to photograph. She wasn't in a rush, just taking pictures, meeting locals, and enjoying the forest. One afternoon, while filling gas in a small town, an old man at the station told her about a place called Dagger Creek. "You like strange stuff?" he asked. "Go there. That town is something else." Lisa asked where it was, and he gave her directions. "But don't stay past sundown," he added. "Seriously, get in, look around, and leave." She laughed it off. "Is it haunted or something?" she joked. The man just looked at her and said, "Just go see for yourself." Now here's where it begins to get creepy. Dagger Creek wasn't on her map. It wasn't on GPS either, but she followed the man's directions, which led her down a winding, cracked road into thick woods. After about 30 minutes of driving, her phone lost signal completely. But then, through the trees, she saw it. An old town, barely holding itself together. Broken buildings, boarded up windows, overgrown sidewalks. It looked like no one had lived there in decades. Lisa parked and started taking pictures. She was thrilled. It was exactly the kind of abandoned, eerie place her followers loved. She wandered through the main street, snapping photos of a collapsed diner, a tilted mailbox, and what looked like an old theater. Everything was dusty, forgotten. Then she noticed something strange. In one of the buildings, an old general store, she saw light. Not just a trick of the sun, actual light. Faint, but flickering, like a candle. So of course she went in. Inside it smelled like damp wood and dust. Shelves still had rusted cans and broken jars. But toward the back, near the counter, she found a small oil lamp lit and glowing. There was no wind, no sound, just the tiny flame dancing in the still air. Lisa thought someone might be living there. "Hello?" she called out. No answer. She walked behind the counter, and that's when she saw something that made her stop cold. On the dusty wooden floor was a pattern, a circle made of old rope with symbols drawn in chalk all around it. At first she thought it was a prank or maybe a leftover from some kids messing around. But then she heard it, footsteps, from upstairs. She froze. "Hello?" she said again, louder this time. "Is someone there?" No answer, but the footsteps continued, slow, steady, like someone was pacing. She backed away, heart pounding. That's when she noticed something even worse. The rope circle. It had moved. Just slightly, but enough to see. It wasn't perfectly round anymore. It had stretched, like something inside had shifted. She didn't take another photo. She just turned and walked quickly out the front door, back into the fading daylight. She decided she'd seen enough. She headed to her car, but then realized something that sent chills down her spine. The car was gone. She had parked it right in front of the diner. But now it wasn't there. Not a trace. No tire marks. No broken glass. Nothing. At first, she thought maybe she had wandered farther than she thought. Maybe she was on the wrong street. But as she ran up and down the cracked pavement, looking at the empty buildings, she started to feel a sickening truth settle in. The layout of the town had changed. The diner was gone. So was the theater. In their place were buildings she hadn't seen before. A school, a barber shop, a church. But all of them were burned, blackened, destroyed, like they'd been through a fire years ago. She stood there, stunned, trying to make sense of it, when she heard it again. Footsteps. This time, not from a building, from behind her. She turned around slowly. There was a figure standing in the middle of the road, tall, too thin, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, something out of the 1800s. The face was pale but blurry, like looking at a person through dirty glass. It didn't move. It just stood there. Lisa took a step back. The figure took a step forward. She turned and ran. She didn't stop. She ran past every building, every broken window, every flickering light. All she could think was, "Get out. Get out. Get out." Eventually, she found the edge of the town again. The cracked road where she had come in. But it didn't look the same. The trees were closer. The road was narrower, like the forest had moved in while she was gone. And then, her car, parked right where she had left it. She didn't question it. She jumped in, locked the doors, and floored it. As she drove away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. The town was gone, not in the distance, just gone. Trees, sky, road, nothing behind her but normal woods. Lisa didn't stop driving for over an hour. When she finally got back to the gas station in the small town, the old man was still there. She slammed the car door and ran up to him. "What was that place?" she yelled. "Why didn't you tell me it was real?" He didn't even look surprised. He just said, "You got out. That's all that matters." She asked again what it was. He looked her in the eye and said, "Some places don't belong here. They're stuck between now and then, between here and somewhere else. Dagger Creek shows up sometimes, and it takes what it wants." Lisa never went back. She deleted all the photos she took, even though a few had already gone to her blog. She says when she looked at them closely, there were faces in the windows. Faces she hadn't seen at the time. Sometimes when she dreams, she says she's back in that store. And sometimes the dream ends with her in the circle of rope and someone lighting the lamp. So if someone ever tells you about a town that's not on the map, one you can only find by accident, don't go, because some places remember, and some places don't let you leave. This is the story of something truly disturbing that happened to someone I know. I'm going to tell you exactly how it was told to me, and I swear this is a true story, not one of those made-up horror tales. This one is real. And it still gives me chills when I think about it. It happened to my friend David. Now, David isn't the kind of guy who gets scared easily. He's not superstitious, doesn't believe in ghosts, and he even laughs at horror movies. But what happened to him changed all of that. Forever. It all started about 5 years ago when David moved into a new apartment in a small town. He got a good deal on rent, which looking back was the first red flag. The landlord told him someone had moved out suddenly and was desperate to find someone to take over the lease. David didn't think too much about it. He just wanted a quiet place near his new job. The building was old, but it looked fine on the outside. Just your typical two-story house split into apartments. The weird stuff began almost immediately. The first night, David heard something scratching in the walls. Not too strange, right? Could have been rats or something. But when he banged on the wall, the sound stopped, and then started up again on the opposite side of the room, like it was moving with him. He even checked outside, but there was nothing there. No signs of animals or damage. He let it go. The next night, around 2 a.m., he woke up suddenly. His room was freezing, like someone had opened a window, but all the windows were shut tight. Then he noticed something even stranger. His bedroom door, which he always closed at night, was wide open. He was sure, absolutely sure, that he'd closed it before going to bed. Still, he thought maybe he just forgot. But things didn't stop there. Every night for a week, something happened. Doors creaked open. Lights flickered. Once, he came home from work and all the kitchen chairs were turned upside down on the table like someone had been cleaning. But the room was dusty. No one had been inside. He checked with the landlord, who swore no one else had keys. David even changed the locks just in case. But that didn't stop it. One night, David was lying in bed, half asleep, when he heard someone whisper his name. It was soft, but clear, like it came from right next to his bed. He sat up, heart pounding, and turned on the light. No one was there. He checked his phone. No messages. Then he realized something terrifying. There was condensation on the mirror across the room, like someone had breathed on it. And written on the mirror, in a foggy smear, was just one word. Leave. He didn't sleep that night. Now at this point, most people would have packed up and left. But David was stubborn. He thought maybe someone was messing with him. So he set up a cheap camera in his room, facing the mirror, hoping to catch whatever it was. The camera recorded all night, and in the morning, he watched the footage. At YSI, first, everything looked normal. Then, around 3:13 a.m., the footage glitched. Just for a second. Then something appeared. A figure, tall, thin, completely black, stepped into view. Its shape was human, but wrong, like it was stretched too far. It walked up to the mirror, slowly, like it was floating more than walking. Then it leaned close to the glass and fogged it up. David could see the word leave forming again, right before the thing turned and stared directly at the camera. That's when the video cut out. No sound, no static, just total black. David showed it to me later. I saw it with my own eyes, and let me tell you, I couldn't sleep for a week after. He took the footage to the police, but they didn't believe him. They said it was faked, a trick of the light, maybe a shadow. They refused to investigate. He even showed the landlord, who went pale and told him something that made his blood run cold. The apartment used to belong to an old man named Mr. Harland. He was a loner, kept to himself. One night, the landlord went to check on him after no one had seen him for weeks. He found Mr. Harland dead in the bedroom. No sign of struggle, but his face was twisted in terror, like he'd seen something awful just before he died. There was one more detail. When they found him, the mirror in his room had a word smeared on it. Stay. David moved out that week. He didn't even pack most of his stuff. He just grabbed his wallet, his phone, and his keys, and left. He stayed with me for a few nights, and the man was like a shell of himself. Pale, jumpy, always looking over his shoulder. Here's the part that still haunts me. A few months after he left, David got a phone call. No caller ID. When he answered, no one spoke, just heavy breathing. Then that same whisper from the apartment, his name, followed by static. Then a click. He changed his number the next day. I wish I could say it ended there, but David's never really been the same. He won't sleep with mirrors in his room. He won't be alone in a house after dark. Sometimes he still hears whispers. He says he feels it watching him. We even tried burning the footage, deleted it from every device, but the image is burned into my brain. That shadow thing, the foggy writing, the stare. I believe him. Every word. And if you saw his face when he tells the story, you'd believe it too. So if you ever find a place that seems too cheap, too quiet, or too empty, maybe there's a reason. And if a mirror ever fogs up on its own and gives you a warning, listen to it. Some things don't want to be seen. Some things follow you, even when you leave. And some stories, they don't end. They just wait. Do you believe in ghosts now? Because I do.